Take a look at the person sitting next to you on your right. Now take a look at the person sitting next to you on your left. Do you know their names? If not, then say hi to that neighbor. How many of you truly grew up in neighborhoods where you trusted your neighbors? Look again at that neighbor sitting to your left. Would you trust them with lending them a couple $100 or two? How about trusting them to take care of your pet? Trusting them to take care of your children? Okay, that might be a bit much. However, these are tough questions to ask as we acknowledge the great deal of non-physical separation among us. See, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a tight-knit, low-income, Section 8 community called Lacey Park, or Warminster Heights, that truly embodied the ancient African proverb of "it takes a village to raise a child," a phrase that places emphasis on community and family and its role and impact in raising children safely, securely, and successfully. However, as a young, transient adult getting ready to raise my own kids, I had to ask myself, where is my village? Do they just show up? Is there a number to call? How do I build one? This was especially important to me, especially as a social worker, working in community programs where my job was to raise their village. And growing up in Lacey Park, I saw this firsthand of the vitalness and importance of having a village. See, in Lacey Park, we were self-guided, self-sufficient, and acknowledged the necessity that we needed to rely on each other to raise our own socioeconomic status. I was able to go across the street and ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar, go next door for a cigarette for my mom. My mom was able to have the neighbor's daughter down the street watch us as another neighbor took her to go food shopping. It was in this community where we supported local businesses like the Hut and the Limbe Lady. And ultimately, I learned that if it wasn't for my neighbors and that feeling of connectedness, I would not have been empowered to seek out higher education. They helped me survive and empowered me to reach my best self, especially in order to escape a childhood riddled with abuse, addiction, and violence. So, as a community social worker, part of my job is to reintegrate clients coming from jails, prisons, hospitals, into acknowledging and getting back that feeling. See, community is a feeling. It's a feeling of fellowship among others with shared interests, attitudes, beliefs, and goals. And I learned that this feeling is the most crucial to our survival, to our well-being, and to achieving the best possible outcomes for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and for our children. And when I say community, I don't just mean the community in which you live in. I mean the numerous communities we all can belong to, such as the LGBTQ community, your work community, music, arts, religious communities. Even as we go through this pandemic, as we experience intense changes in cultural norms and how we connect, even joining virtual online communities is so vital to our existence right now. A year ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a term and illness that my own village had no idea about. However, I went on Facebook, joined an online group, and really got the tools, the resources, and the support that I needed to cope with this new diagnosis and truly learn about a new part of my life. Studies have shown that adults who have made new social connections within 2 years were 20 times less likely to experience depression, and if initially diagnosed, were more likely to recover. Countries like Denmark, Finland, Switzerland, they're ranked among the happiest countries in the world, where they foster and have that collective social responsibility, that responsibility to rely on each other and contribute to everyone's social systems, such as healthcare, education, childcare, and more. So, as a social worker, reintegrating my clients, I had to ask them, hey, How can we link you to vital community resources to help you succeed? And I started applying this philosophy on a macro level. If it takes a village to raise a child, how do we make our village the best village it can be so that we raise our children successfully and in a way that they can then reproduce? And I would say it starts with an instance that during this pandemic has affected the most vulnerable communities. As COVID increases, so does our crime rates. However, with this ideology, we will be able to empower each other and participate in effective change. Cities like Philadelphia began incorporating police officers in their town hall meetings. Cities like Chicago, with their neighborhood policing initiative, where they aimed at bridging the gap between police officers by appointing community ambassadors to be that liaison. As a social worker, especially dealing with those with criminal histories, I often have to discuss with my clients potential disconnects seen by police officers, where they might not be familiar with neighborhood makeup, cultural layout, or even cultural norms. This is especially apparent in cities like Detroit, where 53% of the police force lived outside of the city. I also have to take into account collective social responsibility. Neighborhoods that have active neighborhood watch see a 16% decrease in crime. However, in the US, only 12% of those communities have active programs. So speaking of a lack of community participation, I saw this firsthand while working at Big Brothers Big Sisters, leading their minority outreach initiative where we were trying to recruit adults to become positive leaders in children's lives. However, I also saw firsthand the lack of participation, the lack of empowerment community members felt to take part in these programs. Only 19% of adults volunteer to become a mentor or to participate in children's programs to increase their well-being. However, I found this strange. If having a positive adult mentor can increase a child's self-esteem, self-image, their school performance, make them feel more secure in their various other communities, why aren't more of us stepping up? This is especially true in regard to community centers, where more funding and more attention should be focused on. When I was growing up in Lacey Park, it was our community center that was the hub for us to access resources, to provide and obtain information. It was truly the hub of the assistance that we so desperately needed. As a social worker, I strive to link my clients to these necessary community resources in order for them to achieve that sense of belonging, interconnectedness, that sense of fellowship and community that leads to those positive outcomes. In my dual role as therapist, I see how oftentimes mental health talk is taboo. If we gravitate toward a mindset of normalizing some of the traumas we face, normalizing some of the mental health issues that we all go through, we will then be able to build a more village where we're able to have more positive outcomes. Only about 30% of minority adults seek out therapy and assistance, compared to the 43% of the nation average. I believe we can change this by simply normalizing and encouraging one another that says, hey, this is okay to seek assistance, to not internalize our struggles and our fears, and to rely on our neighbors. As a therapist, I often help reintegrate my clients by using the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, acknowledging with them and encouraging them to build their village so that they have assistance and can rely on someone to fulfill those needs, similar to when I did. It was my community in Lacey Park that fulfilled my basic needs, such as making sure that we were fed, making sure that there was food at the pantry that my family often went to. We didn't know what we were going to eat for the next week. It was my community that helped me achieve a basic sense of safety. The adults that made sure that we were in the home by the time the lights came on. Having that safe feeling and having all of our basic needs met by relying on each other contributed to us becoming more social and eventually having a higher self-esteem. Now, at the top of that pyramid is self-actualization. So we acknowledge that we need the help of others and the help of our community to achieve that, to become the best version of ourselves. That is what we must focus on. So, how I envision this and how I present this to my clients and motivate them to get out of their comfort zone, to participate, and to really join these new social connections is to simply care. It starts with caring about how your neighbor is doing, the grief or the trauma they may be facing, caring about one another's family, and caring about the numerous aspects and issues that affect all of our communities that we belong to. Acknowledging the traumas that a lot of us similarly face, and changing the culture where we are very biased and where a lot of us are scared to get out of our bubble in regard to the stereotypes that we hold true. Participating in neighborhood activities, events, participating in volunteering, participating and giving our neighbors, even the ones we may not know that well, the vital resources, the dollar, the information that we know will help them achieve value in their life. And secondly, empowerment. How can we empower one another to build our village, and how can we empower ourselves to get out there and make the first step? See, this became especially apparent to me about 6 months ago when my sister passed away. It was my community, it was Lacey Park, who cared about the grief and the trauma my family and I were facing, acknowledged my sister's horrible plight through addiction, and acknowledged the after effects that it could cause for me and my brother. They participated in creating GoFundMes and participated in the best going away celebration we could ever throw for her. And that helped and empowered me to get through my grief and empower one another to get through tough times like that. So do me a favor. Next time you're walking down the street, put down your phone and say hi to the woman that you commonly see walking her dog every morning. Or give $1 to that homeless man that we might have to check our biases about in order to make that step. However, when we do this, we will achieve the self-actualization. We will achieve how we can build our village and achieve the most positive outcomes for ourselves. Especially in the field that I work in, that feeling of interconnectedness, especially during this time of COVID and the sense of virtual connection, is vital. We must all work together to make sure that us as a collective, rather than the individualistic mindset we carry, all can produce and be positive members of our communities. So just remember, when the I in illness is replaced with we, it becomes wellness. And by making sure that our village is healthy and well and positive, that's how we will produce effective change. Thank you.